G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Swamp wallaby showed up for its usual feed, but today I want to talk about chainsaws. Now this is some firewood that I cut a couple of days ago, and as you can see the chainsaw is cutting pretty well in a straight line. One side is more ragged than the other one. We have little tiny micro grooves on one side, and we have great big swarfy shit looks on the other side. Once again, small little tooth marks that side, small little tooth marks that side. This side there's a big difference. So what this indicates is something's going wrong with the chain. And here's a Husqvarna saw, cost me $900. It's done 50 hours, 35 minutes. It's on its fourth chain after 50 hours. Regular viewers of my channel will know that I keep logbooks on things so I can keep track of what goes on when. You know, there's the first new chain going on, and you know, anything that's anomalous gets written down, so I actually kind of sort of know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've transcribed this onto a little bit of paper. First chain went on the 13th of November 2023. It cut for 15 hours and 3 minutes, and on the 23rd of the 6th 24 it got thrown off the bar. So okay, I put a new chain on, one that was, you know, not doing that. The second chain went on the 23rd of the 6th 24, 7th of the 7th 24, so you know, a couple of weeks later it was cutting in circles. 22nd of the 8th, still cutting in circles. 7th of the 4th 25, it had done 19 hours and 3 teeth had been pulled off on the right hand side of the chain, which I figured was why it was cutting in circles. Third chain went in on the 13th of the 4th 25. It came out on the 25th of the 9th 25 after 5 hours and 40 minutes, and it had 2 teeth off on the right hand side, and I was pretty pissed off at that point. I didn't quite know what was going on. One of my hypotheses was that the Stihl brand triple parallel chainsaw file that I had been using on the Husqvarna saw maybe had some kind of a dimensional difference where it worked okay on a new chain, but after a few hours of work, as the teeth got shorter, maybe the dimensions of the Stihl chainsaw file didn't quite suit the Husqvarna file. So although I'm quite a fan of the Stihl triple parallel chainsaw files, I decided to retire this one in 4mm for the micro chain on the Husqvarna machine. So I bought a Husqvarna chain sharpener, which is a double parallel rig, and you have to sort of take it to pieces every time you change sides because you've got to put the handle at the other end. And yeah, it works, and it was working real well, and I was very pleased with it, and I was convinced that I'd figured it out. You know, you've got to use a Husqvarna file on a Husqvarna chain, otherwise after 5 or 15 hours it all goes wrong. And you can see the light coloured joining link there. That's where a tooth has been pulled off and it's missing, and it's not there. You got a tooth, you got a missing tooth, you got a 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 tooth, and there's another missing tooth. See? 2 teeth ripped off, and I'd done quite a lot of filing and sharpening to try and keep that chain cutting straight. So 5 hours, 2 teeth off, started cutting in circles, retired that chain. Put the details on the box of the next chain that I put in. And that second chain that did 19 hours and had 3 teeth off, I actually returned that in its previous box to the dealer so he could, you know, give it to the supplier and say, look, there's something going wrong with the chains. 3 teeth pulled off on the same side. Something's going wrong with the metallurgy, perhaps. Which brings us to this chain, which is the one that cut the firewood I showed you earlier. It was installed on the 26th of the 9th. The saw had done 38 hours and 48 minutes when that chain was put on. And at the 48 hour and 59 minutes mark, so okay, 10 hours of service, it took me 2 hours of filing it to try and get that to work because the teeth were bent just behind the cutting edge. Never seen it before. And that was on the 10th of the 5th, 26. On the 11th of the 5th, 26, 3 teeth were off on the right hand side. On the 12th of the 5th, it was developing a really funny sort of a feather edge, as if the file was sort of cutting too far back and not perhaps retaining its depth. So you were changing the angle of the cutting edge of the teeth. It was a much shallower angle, there was less metal supporting it, so when the tooth dug into a bit of grainy wood, the tooth was actually bending at the cutting edge. And if you hit a rock, the tooth would get sort of folded over, which is why it took me 2 hours of filing to try and open up the teeth. Okay, so there's our joining link. We have 1 missing tooth, 2 missing teeth. And I'll change that around so we've got the joining link there. 1 missing tooth, 2 missing teeth, 3 missing teeth, 4 missing teeth, 5 missing teeth. There's missing tooth number 5. And we come around and there's missing tooth number 6. And there's our joiner tooth. So we've lost 6 teeth and they're all fallen off on the right hand side of the chain. Okay, now for comparison, this is a brand new chain. That's what the tooth is supposed to look like. And here, don't know if it's going to show up, but the cutting edge has dug into the wood and it's been bent up. And there's a little spur there, right on the point. Try it through a magnifying glass. Don't know if that's going to help, but yeah, that's kind of like full magnification. And yeah, the top of the tooth's bent up. There it is again. This next tooth has got a chunk broken off it. There's another one that's had the front end of the tooth broken off. There's one where it's broken off from the bottom. Most of them, the tooth just gets ripped straight off the chain. That's one on the left hand side, and it's also been broken off at the front. It doesn't have a point on it. There's one that's bent up, another one that's bent up, another one that's broken off. I haven't got 3 hands, so it's kind of difficult to show what the difference is, but yeah, there's something going on, and from what I can make out, it's probably a heat treatment issue. Now, presumably all of these little links are manufactured separately, and presumably while they are soft, they get sharpened, and then they get heat treated, and then they get, you know, polished and finish sharpened. But I might be wrong. Maybe some other process happens, but at some point all of these teeth get hardened by being heated up red hot and then suddenly chilled, and then they get heated up again and slowly cooled down. They don't get heated up as much the second time, and that it's called tempering because it takes the brittleness out of the tooth. And what seems to be going on is it's only the very front part of the tooth that's getting hardened before it's getting tempered. So when you get the chain new in the packet, it's got a hard cutting edge on each one of the teeth. And as you file it back, that cutting edge is removed, and then you get into a soft middle part of the tooth. And that soft middle part of the tooth is the bit that bends, like that one, or that one. I hope you can see that little turned up spike on the end of it. And what that is a sharpened piece of soft steel which is dug into the wood and then been sort of literally ripped out of line. If I'm right and there's a hardening defect, then that would also explain why suddenly after between 5 and 10 or 15 hours, your file starts biting much deeper into the tooth and creating that really super narrow, shallow edge which gets bogged in the wood, and then that's what rips the tooth off the chain. And I don't know, perhaps the people at Husqvarna have no idea back in Sweden that they've done this, or alternatively they know exactly what they've done and they've caught it too late, and they've already assembled a whole production run of chains which have the teeth on the right hand side of the blade, because you delineate this by looking at the saw from the top. So this is the left hand side, that's the right hand side, and it's all of the right hand side teeth which are going wrong. It's the only way to put it, they're going wrong. And then perhaps they have deliberately, cunningly, with malice aforethought, sent all of these crook chains to the far ends of the earth on the theory that if they get finally widely distributed, people will get their new chain. It'll work really well for 5 hours or so, maybe 10 hours, particularly if it's cutting in soft wood, particularly if it's cutting in clean soft wood, so it doesn't get sharpened very often. And then all of a sudden the chain just goes wrong and the operator will blame themselves and go and buy a new chain, like I did 4 times in 50 hours. But finally, eventually, when you get a chain that goes as wrong as this one has, it becomes clear even to the most loyal Husqvarna supporter that their $900 saw is being equipped with defective chains. I think it would be nice if other people can pay attention to what's happening with their Husqvarna micro chain electric chainsaws and see whether they've got a problem too, or whether all of the defective units have been shipped out to Australia for hillbillies like me to suffer and plod along with and blame ourselves and go and buy a new one and go and buy a new one and go and buy a new one. Because I'm used to getting 25 hours out of a chainsaw chain, and it takes 2 years to do it. That's with Stihl petrol chainsaws. I'm now getting 5 to 19 hours out of a chainsaw chain on an electric machine, and I don't believe it's got anything to do with the electricity. It's got to do with the manufacture of the chain. Something's gone wrong with the heat treatment process for the teeth on the right hand side of their micro chains, and either they don't know about it and they're selling shit, or they do know about it and they're still selling shit. Possibly the most remarkable part of the whole story is that this chain, with 6 teeth missing, is still cutting in a straight line. And maybe, perhaps, for that we can thank the Husqvarna sharpener. Maybe perhaps I was not entirely wrong in hypothesising that there was some discontinuity between the Stihl sharpening system and the Husqvarna chains, because if you persist in using the correct sharpener on a chain that's got badly heat treated teeth, yeah, you can get 10 or so hours out of it and it'll still cut straight. But it doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth when you think about it. It's one of those shit a bugger bitch bum canut fuck poo type situations. I just wish manufacturers would do an honest job and sell a defect-free product. Surely that's not too much to ask for, you know. If they want to run a bloody chainsaw manufacturing business, they can at least sell good stuff. It's not as if they sell it at a cheap discount price because they know it's shitty. You know, $900 for a chainsaw and $465 for a big battery and $265 or something for a little battery. It becomes a fairly expensive exercise, and then you find that every 5 or 15 hours you've got to buy a new $43 chain because the old one sheds its teeth after they start bending and breaking in the wood. I'm a less than happy warbles on a lot with this particular story. What I'm going to do is keep using the Husqvarna sharpening file on the Husqvarna chain that's missing 6 teeth, and I'll see just how long it goes. And the only thing that'll pull it out of service is when I hit a rock and I get the teeth that are bent over and folded in, and I'll take the bent folded chainsaw teeth back to the dealer in the little box, and I'll tell him to send it off to the representative and the importer, and they can make what they like out of it. In the meantime, this is the warning. There's a video on YouTube showing Husqvarna micro chainsaws have problems. Not entirely certain how it come to be, but I'm sure they've got problems. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. If your saw is doing this to you too, do not blame yourself. It's not your fault. You have been sold a pig in a poke by someone who's either incompetent or they're an arsehole. And I don't mean the importers in your country, I mean the arseholes who are manufacturing them this way and shipping them all around the world. Or maybe they only ship them to Australia. Maybe they think we're stupid. Come to your own conclusions. Ciao.